This is Keys to the Shop, episode 287. Learn how to shift your mind with Brian Levenson. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thanks a lot for taking the time to listen today. And I hope that you're subscribed to the show. If you're not, just hit subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and you'll be updated with new episodes whenever they come out, which is about 10 times a month right now. So quite a bit of good content coming your way. Get subscribed to stay up to date with all of that. And also, if you would share these episodes with a friend and rate or review the show, that would be awesome as well. If you love what we do at Keys to the Shop, leaving a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts would be such a great favor. Thank you so much to everybody who has already done that. Now, Keys to the Shop, on top of doing this podcast, also offers consulting and coaching for you and your coffee business. Whether you're just getting started as a coffee entrepreneur and need expert guidance and advice on getting started on the right foot, or you're an established business and you are trying to scale, or you're trying to take your operations, your people, and your quality to the next level, there are a lot of ways that Keys to the Shop Consulting can come alongside you and help you in this process, whether that is remotely or on site. I would encourage you to reach out to me if you want to set up a free discovery call. To do that, just email chris@keystotheshop.com, and we'll talk about what's going on with your business and how Keys to the Shop Consulting might be able to help you. Again, that email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers for two main reasons. They curate the best equipment from all over the world, and they work directly with you to get you the right equipment for your situation. And getting equipment in your cafe is, a stressful thing. I mean, you have to spend a lot of money to do this, and you want some reassurance that the people that you're buying from are on your side. And I can't think of anybody who does that better than Prima Coffee. Right now, if you use the promo code KEYS5 at checkout, you can get 5% off your entire order at Prima Coffee. Just go to the website prima-coffee.com/keys, and when you're done shopping, just use the code KEYS5, that's KEYS, and the number 5 at checkout, and you get 5% off your entire order. This is a really great deal, so definitely take advantage of that. And if you're in the market for great commercial coffee equipment and you want to partner with people who truly care about your success in coffee, then I highly recommend you use prima-coffee.com/keys. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series is hands down the world leader in plant-based performance beverages because everything they offer in their extensive lineup is created for baristas and tested by the world's best baristas before you use it in your cafe. So you'll know when you're making your customers a plant-based beverage with the Barista Series, it'll stand up to the heat from steaming, produce amazing texture, great for latte art, and also keep the balance of the beverage focused on the coffee. All of this is so critical for your customers to have the best experience with your menu. And so I would recommend going to pacificfoodservice.com to find out more and get this in your store to try it out for yourself. If you're looking to offer your customers the best plant-based beverage experience, then I think you need to be serving the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everybody. Well, today we are diving into the world of mindsets. In particular, we're going to be exploring how to shift your mindset between the preparation mindset and the performance mindset. And this is not something that only pertains to whether you're prepared and performing well for a competition, like a barista competition or a sporting event or something like that. This is when you're preparing for anything that you do professionally, say running a coffee shop or being a barista in your day-to-day work on shift. And so I'm really excited today to explore this topic with the author of the book, Shift Your Mind, Brian Levenson. Now, Brian Levenson is the founder of Strong Skills, which provides executive coaching and mental performance coaching, speaking, and consulting to elite organizations, performers, and leaders. He's been fortunate to work with CEOs, professional athletes, and with teams in the NBA, NHL, and MLS, Division I athletic departments, the Federal Reserve, the Department of Homeland Security, and many other organizations. He also hosts a weekly podcast called Intentional Performers, where he interviews a diverse group of elite performers. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the concept of mindset shifts through Brian's new book that's taking the mindset and performance world by storm. We'll be talking about things like humility versus arrogance, perfectionism and adaptability, present versus future, and other mindset shifts that I think are going to be critical for you running a great coffee bar. So I'm really excited to have Brian on the show. Let's get right to the interview on learning how to shift your mind with Brian Levenson. All right, Brian, welcome to Keys to the Shop. So excited to have this conversation today. How are you doing?
Chris, thanks for having me. I told you before we started recording that I'm not a coffee drinker, so hopefully your audience doesn't stop listening right now. But I've spent many a days in coffee shops, and when I first started in my career, I actually would Google coffee shops that had good seating areas because I used to go to my clients and meet with them in coffee shops. So I've spent a lot of time smelling coffee, but drinking green tea. So I'm really grateful to be here, and I think what you're doing is super cool. So
thanks so much.
Dive in with you.
Well, we're here to talk about the mind and mind shifts, and I am really excited because I think your book does such an amazing job capturing the essence of what it is to sort of have to be mentally nimble in the process of becoming better at a profession or sports or pretty much anything that you want to have high performance in. And so I guess to start off this conversation, what kind of led you to focusing on what you do now and kind of being obsessed with mindsets and performance the way you are?
Honestly, I was lost. And I think when you're lost, you have the potential to find yourself. And I think even what we're going through now with the pandemic, I think a lot of people are going through transitions because they're with themselves more than they maybe have been in the past. And so I think it's an interesting time to be alive. And I think a lot of people are transitioning jobs, transitioning relationships, transitioning locations as far as where they live. And for me, that lost feeling occurred when I graduated from college. So I know you're from Syracuse, the city. I went to Syracuse University. And when I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do for a living. So I got into sales, and actually my second job out of college was selling ice cream and candy. And I mentioned I don't drink coffee. I'm also very strange because I don't eat ice cream or chocolate. We sold caramels. I started to like caramels when I worked at the ice cream and candy store and warehouse, but my job was to sell wholesale to restaurants, grocery stores, coffee shops, whoever would have candy or ice cream. And while I was doing that, I loved sales. I shouldn't say I love sales. I would say I liked sales. I enjoyed connecting with people and trying to give them something that would add value to their business. But I didn't think that the sales lifestyle would be exactly what I wanted. So I started just exploring and talking to people that I thought were interesting or quote unquote successful. And one of those people was a woman named Julie Ellion. We went out to the Cheesecake Factory one day and probably ate way too much food. And when I left that lunch, I said that job would be really interesting for me to do. And essentially what Julie's job was a combination of mental and psychology with sports. And so for me, loving sports my entire life, I thought it would be a nice blend of helping people in the psychology side and also working in sports. So went to grad school for sports psychology. And today I actually do probably more executive coaching than I do in the sports psychology realm. But at the end of the day, I just love helping people get from where they are to where they want to go, regardless of whatever industry they are in. And I found that to be really my thing and really fortunate to find it. And that's sort of the story of how I ended up getting into the world of coaching.
Excellent. So you were able to see a large swath of, humankind in, both sports and in business. I mean, what led to writing this book? Was it the idea that there was a lot of similarities between what you saw people experiencing as you kind of dove into that world professionally?
Yeah, it's a good observation on your part. So I really started my career focused on sports and athletes and teams, and I would work with them and I'd start noticing this pattern that their preparation mind and their performance mind were different. And a lot of times when these athletes would bring their preparation mind into their performance, it would get in the way and it would hinder them. And then as my journey continued and my career continued, I started to get phone calls from people outside of sports, and I started to notice a lot of the same patterns for them as far as what would get in the way. And so that is really the impetus for the book. I had developed a framework where we talk about these 9 shifts for mindset and preparation and mindset and performance. And I started to notice that they were applicable beyond sports. I don't think it's a sports book. I hope people don't just think about it in the sports realm, but there are certainly a lot of analogies and stories in there from the sports world. But for me, the book was written because I wanted to help people. And I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. I do a little bit of speaking. But for me, getting the book into as many hands as possible or ears as possible if they're listening to the book was really the driver for me, because I felt like we don't often talk about this separation between preparation and performance. And we don't often talk about the nuance of things like arrogance and selfishness and focusing on play. We often just assume that we need to be one way, and the book is essentially about polarity and the idea that we need to be different ways for different situations and different environments.
Yeah, that's great. And that's what attracted me to the book, is the idea that inherently these things might seem as opposites of like never do this, but always do that. And you're talking about shifting between performance and preparation as sort of the impetus for the book. And I wonder, what is it that we need to understand about shifting between those things that you observed people doing who are getting good results versus people who were not getting good results, if you will?
Well, I'll give you a good example, because before we started recording, I sort of asked you, Chris, hey, what are you into? And you said, gosh, I love books like Carol Dweck's Mindset. And so this isn't actually a shift in the book, but I'll give people some perspective. So look, Carol Dweck's book Mindset is a must read. It's probably a top 5 book that I recommend to clients. Her work is incredible. She's a professor at Stanford. Just have immense respect for her work. And to me, I wanted to evolve from work like hers and work like many much smarter people than me and the work that they've done. So if you take her concept, which is a growth mindset being better than a fixed mindset, and the idea of a growth mindset being that I'm not there yet and I still have room to grow and learn and develop. If you think about the preparation mind, a lot of that side is around growth mindset. A lot of it is about growing, developing, learning, getting better. But when we get between the lines, it's not about learning and growing often. It might be about learning and growing after the performance, and I highly recommend people do a post-mortem or do a debrief to learn from their performance. But when we're between the lines, I actually think you need more of a fixed mindset. You need to affirm yourself. You need to have this unshakable belief that you can play or you can do the thing that you do. And a lot of times that idea of, oh, I'm just trying to grow or learn can actually hinder our ability to perform. And so that is an example of why I felt like this book needed to be written. And this idea of it depends. It depends on what we're doing that we need to think about our mindset and what mindset we need for these different experiences. So I'm just a big believer in polarity. I'm a big believer that it depends as far as what is good and what is bad. It depends on the situation, the environment, and who we are around as well.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because I've always had a problem with defining normal as a status quo as an inherently negative term, or it's a loaded word that says status quo is something to be avoided. But if you change the status quo, eventually somebody has to carry it out consistently, which becomes the new status quo. So you have to alight on something at some time. And so it feels like we're just trying to constantly create these, like you say, polarities where it's not one or the other. It can be both and so you have 9 of these different examples throughout the book, and I wish we had time to go through all 9, but I want to go through like 5 of them or so to kind of think about like how they might apply to coffee shops in general. I mean, I know you do executive coaching and did a lot in the sports world. I happen to think that when you're running a coffee bar, you've got a team, you've got people that work for you, and you have to manage yourself and them. So I think so much is applicable here. The first example is one between humility and arrogance. And I like the words that you choose here, because at first it's almost offensive. Like, you're going to like make the case for arrogance here. And I'm just let you put your hands on your hips and like, okay, let's see this, Brian. Let's see you do it. So talk to us a little bit about this. I mean, these seem like pretty opposite examples in the book. How do you define, first of all, like humility and arrogance to start off that conversation?
Yeah, I think we start with the offensiveness. So, Chris, when you hear that word arrogance, what do you feel? What goes on inside you when you hear that word arrogance?
Bristling, someone you don't want to be around. You think of examples of people who you just don't want to be like.
And so we've all been around or seen arrogant jerks, and it's not pleasant, especially if you work for an arrogant jerk. It's not pleasant. And in a fast-paced industry, or any retail for that matter, you also have clients that are arrogant and are jerks. And so the book is not making a case to be arrogant all the time. And I think the distinction of how I define arrogance is also important. So let's just go to the definitions and how we describe each of those, because I understand the reaction that people get when they hear the word arrogant. And I'd encourage them, if they're experiencing that right now as they listen, to just sit in that before they turn this off and tune me out. Let's just sit in why we feel that way. And what you'll notice is that defensiveness toward that word arrogance might be holding you back from stepping into the best version of you when you need to step into perhaps a little bit of arrogance. So what are we even talking about? Humility is having or showing a modest or low estimate of one's own importance. And I think that last word, importance, is really important, because if we have a low estimate of how important we are, then we can grow, we can learn, we can develop, we can get feedback. It's massively important in preparation. However, when you get behind the bar and you're doing your job, you have to have an exaggerated sense of your own importance. That coffee that day might be someone's best moment of their day. Even though you're doing coffee, how many people experience coffee when it's made with love? Or even for me, when I experience green tea made with love, or the person really cares deeply about the work that they're doing behind the bar. And so while it might just be coffee and it might not be a matter of life and death, if you believe that you have an exaggerated sense of your abilities and your importance, I believe it's going to lead to a better performance. And I'll end with this as we think about arrogance. For me, it's just this unshakable belief that when I'm behind the bar, I can do my job. And whether it's Serena Williams, whether it's LeBron James, or Usain Bolt, or Bruce Springsteen, or Chris Rock, when they are in their arena, when they are behind their bar, they have an unshakable belief in their ability to execute, and they're not going to get thrown off just because of one or two things. They're going to focus on that unshakable belief, and I believe that that's actually arrogance. It's a step up from confidence, because when we're confident, it can come and go. But if we're arrogant, when we're between the lines, we're committing to having an exaggerated sense of our own abilities.
It almost seems like arrogance is a definition that others give you more than one you give yourself.
That's such an interesting observation, and I haven't heard it like that. And I think a lot of times we are afraid to step into arrogance because of judgment. And we're afraid to come off as being a jerk. But if you have this unshakable belief in yourself, then you can do things that the world might not believe you can do. So whether it's building Starbucks or Phil's Coffee or whatever chain you want to believe in, if you study the people that built those businesses, I promise you, at some point, someone said, you have no chance to do this. And they looked at them and they said, okay. And then in their head, they had arrogant belief in their ability to execute. And I think whether it's Steve Jobs, or pick your Elon Musk, or Sheryl Sandberg, or Kamala Harris, pick whoever changes the world in some capacity, in some world, and breaks barriers, they have to have an unshakable belief in themselves, because the world and society will often tell them that they can't do it.
But it's also like there's two sides to every story, right? In all of these things, it feels like they can go awry. So it feels like in order to have that unshakable confidence, or even stepping into that level of arrogance, you do need to have that preparation that comes beforehand with humility, I guess. Like, isn't that the case?
Absolutely. So the book is not, it was interesting because some people, when I started writing the book, I got feedback, and some were like, you just should focus on the performance mind. And I said, no, that's not what the book is about. The book is about both of these, that if you are humble in preparation, then you will earn the right to be arrogant in performance. I had on Spike Mendelsohn on my podcast, and he's a celebrity chef, and he talked about the process that chefs go through when they are preparing. And this is another shift. They're perfectionistic in their preparation so that they can be adaptable in their performance. They are humble in their preparation, trying new things, experimenting, getting feedback, tasting, make it better, so that once they go live and once they open up their doors, they can have a sense of, hey, we're going to get it done and we're going to make it happen. And so absolutely, you earn the right to the performance mind, I believe, by the preparation mind. And I would add this other piece, which sports gets right, and sports gets a lot of stuff wrong, but it gets this right, which is they practice. And so for me, a great practice will involve both the preparation mind and the performance mind. So what do I mean by that? A great practice will give space to being humble in our preparation. And during practice, we'll actually practice that humble preparation. And a great practice will go live and see what it's like to have arrogant performance. And that's what I always love watching restaurants to take their time before opening. And they do a soft opening and they have 2 weeks or a week or a weekend or whatever their process is to get it right and to practice. And that practice shouldn't just be the preparation mind. It should be quote unquote live bullets where you're actually dealing with customers and making sure that you have this belief that we're ready to go. And for me, I'm not a restaurant tour or restaurant expert, but I'd imagine a lot of your listeners open too soon and they burn bridges too soon. And once you burn bridges, it's hard to come back from that. And so I love studying restaurants that really take their time on the front end and get it right so that when their doors are open, they have this machine process and customer service and product. And those are the ones that I often see thrive.
That's a great observation. Yeah. People do open too soon and they lead with arrogance sometimes and with assumptive, tendencies where they're just like, we're ready, and we're just a little bit calling victory too soon in this area where you're kind of reversing the, and sometimes it's reversed. Like people will, they need to be arrogant or, confident or whatever when they need to be humble.
If you reverse them, if you're arrogant in preparation and humble in performance, I'm telling you, it's going to be a struggle and you're not going to fulfill your potential. So if you flip any of the preparation and performance, it really can hinder you. And I love what you said. If you lead with that arrogance in preparation, like I think you're already done. Like you're already screwed. But I will tell you, I have worked with so many elite performers that their issue is actually that they bring humility into their performance and they never go for it. And they make themselves smaller than they actually are capable of being. And that's why coaches are so valuable, because they can help you see a part of yourself that maybe you don't already see. That's why managers are really valuable, because a lot of us, we play small, we play with fear. We don't step into that performance mind. Also, because we've gotten so many reps in the preparation mind. A lot of us spend far more time preparing than we do performing.
You mentioned this as one of the shifts. I want to get into that a little bit, which is the perfectionism versus adaptability shift. Because as we're talking about, getting ready to open a shop, a lot of people will spend a lot of time perfecting their business plan, their menus, and, I help clients do that type of stuff too. But I'm always very careful to say, like, it's not going to look exactly the way that you think it's going to look 2 years from now. So you have to be prepared to be what you're saying is adaptable. So, I mean, how does perfectionism improve preparation? Because that's part of preparation is to be a perfectionist, which we sometimes bristle against that too. We're like, well, nothing's perfect, but it almost is like you have to trick your mind to do that. Why does that belong where it is?
So once again, perfectionism, we tend to say, don't try to be perfect. I mean, just yesterday I was reading an article that said, stay away from perfectionism. Okay, that's fine. But if you want to be great at anything, you're going to have some perfectionistic standards. The demand for the highest standard of excellence. The bathrooms need to look a certain way. The the branding, the colors, the music that we're playing, it all creates an experience. I remember when I worked for the ice cream company, they would have fresh made cones made every single day. So it smelled like fresh cones. You know the smell of a coffee shop when you go in there. And even though I don't like coffee, I love the smell of coffee. And so having those demands for the highest standard of excellence is really important. And if you don't have those demands, you're going to go awry and you're going to go into a place that's not good enough. And we have to be adaptable. And if we've learned nothing from the last year, we've learned that you don't perfect a pandemic. It doesn't happen. At least for me, there's no perfecting a pandemic. Some of us have lost loved ones. Some of us have lost businesses or jobs. Some of us have lost our health. Some of us have just lost freedom. Whatever it is, there wasn't really perfectionism when it comes to a pandemic. This required us to be adaptable. And I think the similarity between a pandemic and running a store is that they're both wicked environments. And what I mean by a wicked environment is there are unknowns. You don't know who's going to walk through the door and who's not going to walk through the door. You don't know if all of a sudden coffee is going to people are going to say coffee is bad for you, and it's going to impact how many people are walking through the door. You don't know if it's going to snow one day or if it's going to be sunny and 70. You don't know if your state or your city is going to say you can no longer serve. I went to a restaurant the other day and they still don't have any indoor seating. So the pandemic has required all of us to be adaptable, which is just the ability to adjust oneself readily to different conditions. And I do think, and I would imagine, running a coffee shop is similar to what we go through in the pandemic. There are unknowns, there are non-controllables, and how are we going to adjust and do the best we can with what we've got? Are we going to create a walk-up window that just gives people their coffee? Are we going to create some sort of app or online experience or delivery or whatever it is? I don't know what your industry is and what makes sense, but I think those that are adaptable are the ones that innovate, create, cultivate a new mindset and a new way of doing things. That innovation always, in my opinion, I shouldn't say always, usually leads to a better performance. But I once again will go back to what we talked about before. If we are perfectionistic in our preparation and demand the highest standard of excellence, I think we put ourselves into a position to move away from perfectionism in performance and be highly adaptable so that you can serve the needs of your business.
How adaptable can you be without perfectionism?
So I think you can absolutely be adaptable all the time, and it just might not be a high standard of excellence. And so I can adjust, right? Like we had this conversation scheduled. I said, hey, Chris, I might need to adjust it. Okay, let's try to figure it out. And I was like, you know what? I think we're good. But if I just adapted all the time, then I would never stand for anything. I would never stand on something. So at some point, we don't need to innovate. We don't need to adjust. We need to just say, hey, this is the right way to do things. Let's perfect it. Let's get it right. So it's not that we can't be adaptable all the time, but I think the blend of the two is what unlocks potential, is when we have this perfectionism for standards of excellence and we're able to adjust and not hold on to those standards because the standards might change and they might evolve. That blend to me is really beautiful.
Well, it feels like if you're a perfectionist in your preparation, you would account for adaptability in that process.
Well, I'll give you an example. So my wedding day, my wife and I, for some reason, decided to get married outside. There was a beautiful courtyard, and I talk about this in the book, a beautiful courtyard at the hotel that we were hosting our wedding at. So we said, you know what, it's August. If it's nice out, let's do it outside. So the weather looked great. We were going to do it. But that day, we perfected everything. I mean, if you've ever planned a wedding, I was involved a little bit. My wife was involved a lot of it. Yeah. And together we planned this perfect, dreamy wedding that we thought was exactly what it needed to be. Okay, cool. At 5:00, a storm decided to roll in. The clouds got super dark and it started pouring. And all of a sudden, we're like, what the heck do we do now? And we had to adjust and adapt. And so there ended up being like a 15-minute window. We hustled out there, got married, came off. By the time the last person came back inside, it started torrential downpouring. And we had to adapt. We had to adjust. If we stuck with the perfectionism of the timeline or we needed to do X, Y, or Z, we would have all been soaked. It would have been a disaster. Everyone would have been miserable and really mad. Oh, by the way, during our wedding, a boat decided decided to honk its horn over and over again. And we were hearing that as well. And we smiled, and the wind was coming in and gusting. And so there were all these dynamics that we had to adjust for, but I didn't know all the perfectionism that went into that before that. So the party planner realized there was no wood underneath the runner that we were going to walk down, and it would have soaked in because of the rain. So she got her husband to bring wood panels to put under the runner so that we didn't sink when we got on there. My dad looked at the dance floor the day of the wedding and said, "It's too small. I know my son. We need a bigger dance floor." And they extended the dance floor. So my point is, even if you are perfectionistic and have this high standard of excellence and you want to plan for everything in preparation, you're still going to need to adapt and adjust in performance, because that's the way of the world. We live in a wicked environment. We all deal with stuff every single day that changes and evolves. Someone unfortunately could pass away tomorrow. It's just the reality of the life we live. We don't know what's going to happen, even if we're perfectionistic in our preparation.
Right. Yeah. Well said. And so I guess that leads me to the next shift, which is analysis versus instinct. Because after that, you're not. It's not like you're going to make a habit of planning weddings after this. So you've learned something. But a wedding planner might actually look at that and say, well, this is now something I need to analyze, versus in the future, versus instinct. Like these two things we use in coffee shops a lot, where we operate behind our laptops, looking at the numbers go up and down, and we try to make decisions based on data. And we get caught up in one or the other in business. And either we overanalyze or we shoot from the hip too much. I mean, why do you think we tend to kind of fall into one of these categories predominantly? And analysis for everything, data for everything, or just instinct and kind of go with the flow.
And I've witnessed this in the sports world, where Moneyball was a famous book and a movie, and it talked about data and analytics and the Oakland Athletics, a baseball team, right, and how they used it to perform at a much higher level than what they were paying for the talent. And so analytics and data has revolutionized sports in a really profound way, and it's really, really valuable. And I'd imagine the same thing for POS machines and systems and learning about, hey, how many people are coming? When's our busiest time? There's probably all kinds of data like you're saying. And it's really important to have a detailed examination of the elements or structure of something, typically to discuss and to interpret. And that's really what analysis is. And I'm saying that's hugely beneficial in preparation. And when we are performing, when we are live, there are times where we need to move away from analysis. And I would argue those times are more often than not. And we need to rely on this innate or natural impulse, inclination, or tendency. And your people need to be empowered to work with instinct, because you might have developed this amazing process that's based on data or analytics, but you might not have planned for some unknown, like a baseball team comes walking into your store and is ordering 30 coffees at a time and needs them in 10 minutes or whatever might happen. And in those moments, we need to rely on instinct, and we need to rely on our inclination and what I call your gut. So I think analysis is really about our head, and we need our head, but at some point we need to move away from our head and go toward our body and rely on instincts. And if we only rely on analysis and we only rely on data, we often miss opportunities to be there for the people that we serve in a really profound way.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the idea of learning, like music theory, for example. If you're really good at knowing what's on the fretboard, or the even just with sports, the how you can move up and down the field and the things that are within the rules to do. We do this in competitions as well in barista world. You study the rules really, really well. You analyze those things, but in the moment something happens and you drop something, or you misplace a crucial element. You've got to think on your feet, but your preparation and the analysis you've done gives you a little bit of the lay of the land to know where you can go. And without that, it seems like, you're not going to have as much instinct. Is instinct also, could you also consider that wisdom, or that gut feeling that you get from experience?
I think so. I think instincts are built off of experience. They're also built off of analysis. So if we do a great job analyzing, then we've earned the right to use our gut and our instinct. And once again, the issue here is if we just go off instinct in preparation. and then we just go off analysis and performance. We become zombies or robots in performance, and we don't leverage the tools that we have in 2021 in preparation. And so I had an amazing experience. I got to speak to a school in Baltimore called the Peabody Institute, which is connected to Johns Hopkins University. And they're really amazing musicians and sort of savants when it comes to the music industry. And I gave my talk on Shift Your Mind. And afterwards, a young man came up to me, and he was blind. And he talked about his ability to play music because he's blind and able to let go of the analysis or the judgment or the data gives him an edge compared to people that have their sight. And you think of a Ray Charles or a Stevie Wonder, and a lot of the time their genius comes from relying on instinct. And while I tremendously value data, and I think it's hugely important, a lot of times with data, we don't know what we don't know. So it's sometimes we need to rely on our instinct in that moment to create something beautiful or something brilliant. And I go back to that idea of made with love. I remember when I was at the ice cream company, one of my other salespeople, my coworker, loved coffee. And he used to always go into these coffee shops and say, that place, they make it with love. And you can tell a coffee shop that makes it with love, and you can tell one that just has a perfect process for everything. And it's all about the data and the numbers. Or if you go to a cocktail bar and they're measuring out the shot and they're doing this or that versus the one that adds a little love, or the chef. I mean, I think there needs to be a nice blend of analysis and instinct.
I totally agree. I love this one so much because this is... We're talking about human beings here. We're talking about human performance, but we're also talking about just interacting, especially when we're talking about coffee shops. And instinct to me feels like the present moment human interaction, and analysis is sort of like what happened after that. And it can't, if you just figure out that, based on history, this person should say this next. And, it just, like you said, you become this automaton, this zombie. And there are a lot of coffee shops that work that way. In fact, a lot of people that get into the business look for the formula for success in forms of templates, game plans, downloadable instructional booklets, and things like that. But that doesn't give you instinct. Even if it does give you some of the formulas that other people have used, the context is what develops your instinct, I guess.
I think it's spot on. I think the biggest thing you said is we're humans. And if you own or want to own a coffee shop, you know who your clients are. It's not going to be a car. It's not going to be AI. As far as I know, maybe it'll change. Heck, it's not even going to be an animal, most likely. It's going to be a human being. And humans connect with the heart, and they connect with their gut. And so it's hard to connect with someone based on analysis. And a lot of the role of anybody that's in a service industry is to find ways to connect with people. And it's going to be pretty hard to find that based on analysis. The other thing I would say, just to put a bow on analysis and instinct, is paralysis by analysis is real. And if you don't give your people freedom to leverage their instincts and use what makes sense for them in that moment, then they are going to have blind spots, and they're going to miss beautiful opportunities to create relationships and meaningful experiences for the people that they serve. And many of us get overwhelmed by the data or overwhelmed by analysis, and it causes us to freeze, and it causes us to choke. And the research and science around choking under pressure is that it's an overload of data and overload of information. So the ability to switch from head to gut, or even heart, which we haven't really hit on, is really key.
One of the things about being human in tackling that area of analysis versus instinct is like it's safety versus risk in a sense. And one of the shifts that you talk about is fear versus fearlessness, or being fearless. And I'm interested to hear about this one, especially because we have this idea of fear as being inherently bad, but obviously fear also keeps us alive a lot of times. And the balance between the two is kind of tenuous. You talk about Mark Cuban in the book a little bit, and how he says he has a healthy dose of fear. Sometimes I make that comment about skepticism, but I can also see it with fear. So talk a little bit about what is a healthy dose, quote unquote, of fear.
Chris, do you mind if I work with you on this and we sort of work through it together? Awesome. Sure. So did you have fear before this recording or even before firing up the podcast?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you share what that fear was?
Well, I think we'll just talk about this particular recording. I think there was a nervousness that I was, assembling the, notes the right way, that I'm going to get in on time to the meeting. I set up, my station the right way. So I'm just like, okay, I'm feeling a bit of nerves on this, but it's going to be all right. But I did feel some nerves, which I could say might be fear.
And where are you right now as we're recording?
Much more, not there. Definitely, as I hit different mile markers, and we get, past midway in the conversation, it feels like, some of what I might have been worried about may have been a little silly for me to worry about.
Beautiful. So I go through that same thing. I have a podcast. I've now interviewed over 230 people, and I've been doing it for 4.5 years. And I still have this concern or apprehension that I'm going to screw up in my preparation. And so I've created processes to quell that fear, but that fear drives a lot of those processes to make sure that I'm not going to screw up. But when I get on the microphone, that is my time to be bold or brave and not really worry about the loss. That is the time to say, hey, this isn't my full-time gig. I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got. And if I screw up, I screw up, and I'm going to be a little more fearless. And even over our conversation today, you had a moment where you're like, oh, I sort of, that question didn't flow as cleanly as I wanted to. You can take it out or you can leave it in. But to me, you're not stuck on that spot of screwing up that question. So the ability to be bold, brave, move on, and be fearless while we're recording this is essential. But I would argue as soon as you stop recording, then you go back to fear and making sure that everything downloads properly, and you're going to edit it, and you're going to make sure that it's exactly the way that you want it to be. So the push-pull of fear and fearlessness is I think really a profound one. And once again, our society says, go be fearless. I think Oprah said, my dream is to live fearlessly. And God bless Oprah. She's brilliant. I've read her books. I think she's an amazing human being and inspiring. But if Oprah was fearless all the time, I would argue she wouldn't be Oprah. And with the fear and with a little anxiety comes preparation, comes dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that we're exactly where we need to be so that when the lights come on, we can be more fearless. Imagine a coffee shop owner who has no fear. Perhaps they don't order enough beans. Perhaps they don't hire the right people. I know there's right now this big challenge for restaurant owners in general about needing more help. Yeah, that's real. It's here. If you're just fearless and you're not acknowledging that, that's going to be a problem, but that needs to be done in preparation. And your people need to let go of that fear once the doors are open. I was somewhere, on Monday, we were buying some furniture in a furniture store, and it was so interesting to watch the interaction between the two salespeople because one of them was based off when the lights were on, they were fear-based and they were so concerned with their commission, and the other was just trying to serve us and being bold and brave and not concerned about what she was going to get or what she wasn't. And as a result, by the end of it, I said, hey, next time we come in here, I'd love to buy something from you, and if you have any issues with your commission, let me know. So I think when we're between the lines, when we're doing our thing and we're executing, which is really what I think performance is all about, is executing, that's where the fearlessness can help us. But make no mistake, if you're fearless all the time in preparation, it's going to hinder you as well.
So this all seems kind of like if you deny fear and you always push it away and don't kind of redefine it in a sense of a tool, that it's a tool for preparation and not something to be banished from preparation. It seems like we're trying to avoid thinking about failure because then we feel like a failure. Why am I thinking I'm a winner? I'm a winner. I can't think about failure. What does that lead to when we ignore the real possibility of failure?
So I think the idea of don't fear failure is such a loaded concept, and I just don't believe in it. And the way I think about it is it's like sweeping dust under the rug. So nobody can see it. You're Mr. or Mrs. Positive. You're fearless. You're bold or you're brave. but the dust is still under the rug. It'll manifest in some way and create mold and create all kinds of problems. And here's the reality. Humans are wired to fear. It's necessary. It's needed. I have 2 young kids. Yesterday, we were kicking the soccer ball on the sidewalk. Soccer ball goes into the street. You know what my 2 kids need in that moment? They need fear because they are not tall. And if they go into the street, a car might not see them and might run over them and make them become pancakes. And you know what mom and dad don't want? Pancake children. So what do? They need to know, hey, there's some fear there when you go across the street. And that's just something that we get instilled into us, and it's to keep us safe. It's to keep us secure. So the game plan or the role or the idea shouldn't be to be fearless all the time. It's when to acknowledge our fear and when it hinders us and when it helps us. And I just put it into this framework of preparation and performance. But if we zoom out a little bit, it's really about thinking about when is it helpful and when does it hinder me, and then creating processes and systems so that you can step into the fear and sit in it and understand why it's there and what to do when you're in that space to leverage it and to shift out of it when it's becoming a deterrent.
You know, if I find that for myself, and this might be true for a lot of people out there, that if I let something go and if I shift away from something, I'm afraid, well, back to fear, I guess, that I'm not going to be able to pick it back up again if it was useful. So I feel like if I don't list out every single thing that I have to do for my business and my life on a regular basis, I'm going to forget them. Or if I move away from the preparation, I'm going to forget what I did in preparation. And so I'm afraid that I just need to stay in all of these places and not shift away from them. It seems like the wrong way to think about it. I can't help it sometimes that, you know, I have to have a foot in both worlds. Do we
Chris,
have a foot in both worlds, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you want, because this book is about improvement. This book is about fulfilling your potential, getting better. And we don't all have to do that all the time. It's fine. Like our society says, get better, improve, get better. Not necessarily. Like if you're good and you're content, like please keep doing what you're doing. It works for you. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm obsessed with this idea of being and becoming. And it could have been a shift in the book, become in preparation and be in performance. But I think a lot of times we just say you have to become more. All right, you have 1 store. Now you need to get 2 stores. Now you need a franchise. Now you need to grow. And that's not true. It depends on where someone is at. So I wouldn't read this book if you are content with where you're at and things are just good and you don't want to change and you don't want to evolve. And honestly, like no judgment on my end. I actually think our society needs to embrace that for a lot of people. But for where I'm at in my life and where I'm at in my career, like I am obsessed with growing and improving and getting better. I feel like I still have a lot of room to grow and learn and improve. And so that to me is the push-pull here, which is like, no, if you have a process that's always worked for you, perhaps you stay in there. But I always say, like, what got you here isn't necessarily what will get you there. So it really depends where you want to go. And if you want to grow and get better and improve and learn, then I would argue that you need to lean into the fear and preparation and the fearlessness and performance.
Well said again. That brings us to our last shift here that we're going to talk about in our conversation. Appropriately enough, it's future versus present, like talking about what we want to see in our lives and our businesses and other things that we have influence over, I guess. We're living in that time with COVID. The future is not as clear as we would like it to be. It probably never was, but it's much more apparent now that that's the case. I mean, what does it mean to prepare for the future while not ignoring what is here and now?
So I'm going to try to combine 2, if you're okay with it, as we finish up here. And
sure.
So the 2 that I'm going to try to combine are future and present, like you asked for, and also selfish and selfless. And I want to just add selfish and selfless because I think it's especially important for your community and the people that you're serving. So let's go to future and present first. So future is just obviously thinking about what's still to come and planning and thinking about what might happen tomorrow? What might happen next year? Where are we trying to go? What are we trying to earn for this year? How many cups of coffee do we need to sell? What does it look like when we have someone return something and we have spillage or we have to throw stuff out, et cetera, et cetera? You need to spend time in that future mind to think about what could go wrong, what could go well, all that good stuff. But we also need to bring it back to the present, especially when we're executing. And that's existing or occurring at this time right now. I love the phrase, be where your feet are. And when the listeners are in that space behind that bar, they need to be where their feet are. They need to be in that present space. And I keep using that phrase being because it really is about that being present. Whereas future is more about that becoming that I talked about earlier. And the reason why I just want to add selfish and selfless is because if you're a business owner, one of the hardest things to do is to make sure that you're good. And I know this because I've had issues with making sure that I'm good and being concerned primarily with my own interests, benefits, and welfare. And when you're a business owner, a lot of times your focus is on making sure that everybody else is okay. But who's taking care of you? And that's where we have to be selfish and make sure that we're filling up our cup and then giving the reserves or the overflow to our people, to our family, to our friends, to our community. And I see so many business owners work from an empty cup.
Right.
And it's not healthy and it's not helpful. But if you are selfish and if you are focused on the future and preparation, then I would argue you're going to be more likely to step into that present space when you're serving your customers and be able to be selfless if you're serving your team or you're serving those people as well. And in those moments, that's when you need to have little or no concern for oneself and a desire to be part of something bigger than yourself. So I think one of the things I love when I walk into a coffee shop is it's a team. And you can see the team operating and working together and collaborating and communicating. And when it's humming, it is beautiful to watch. And it requires selflessness. It requires being part of something bigger than oneself and serving the team so you can serve the people that walk through the door. But the only way we can serve others is if we serve ourselves first.
Yeah. So put your mask on, then your neighbor. Classic example of self-care in action. And having a team that's dedicated to something that's bigger than themselves means that they are buying into a particular mission or vision. And sometimes we phone that in and we say, well, we just want to serve the community great coffee. And that's what we want to do. And not to say that that's phoning it in every time. It's maybe your heart's desire, but having a very clear mission and vision and purpose is something you talk about in this section that enables this future and present shift in a responsible way. And I imagine it's also part of how you enable self-care and care for others as a shift. How do you suggest that we go about putting in place vision and purpose that does enable those things in our day-to-day lives in business and personal, I guess?
So I'd say there's 4 components that I call your personal framework, and you can map this onto an organizational framework as well. And so first are your values, which drive your behavior. And for values, it's really about the order of your values. So some coffee shops might say the number one thing that we want people to experience when they walk into our coffee shop is joy. And we want this to be a joyful experience. Another might say when they walk in to our coffee shop, we want them to experience peace. And those could be 2 completely different experiences. And those values drive different environments. And if joy is my number 1 and peace is my 5th, then it might look differently than if peace is my number 1 value and joy is my 5th. And so I just encourage people to really think about their values, not just what they are, but the order of their values, because it will drive the ecosystem and the environment that you create at your coffee shop. Mission is about why you do what you do. Simon Sinek obviously popularized start with why. I think it's a belief. The mission is about why do I do what I do? And I really think it's about I. Because we have to start with ourselves, as we talked about earlier. We have to be selfish and think about, well, what do I want? And what's my mission? And if we can get clear on I and what I believe, then we can move to the next part, which is what I believe is your philosophy. And your philosophy is all about you. It's all about you. And so what do I mean by you? It's, hey, this is how we will serve the people that come through our doors. What do they experience? And a lot of times the philosophy is linked to the values, but it can be a little bit different and it can change, but it's a philosophy of the experience and we want them to experience. And then lastly, I think the vision is about we. It's what will we create together? It's a will. It's where are we going? It's into the future. And the we should involve not just me, not just our customers, but also our team and our community. And so that we is what I think the vision is all about. So if you can get clear on your values, your mission, your philosophy, and your vision, then it's really profound. And pretty much all of my clients, we work on those 4 components for themselves and often for their company as well.
It sounds like one of the first things that you should do, right?
It's huge. I actually had a person yesterday who was interested in working with me, and they're just transitioning and starting their own company. And they said, yeah, I'm not sure if the timing's right. And I go, look, like if you can establish those 4 things before you go into the business, you are going to be so far ahead, because that will drive your decision-making as opposed to all the other noise that can come into play when you're starting a business.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here, and this has really been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being here. As we move forward past, well, quote unquote, past 2020 and pandemic and all that, we want to find ourselves resilient in entering into the future and embracing our present, shifting well. I mean, what do you say to people? What do you find yourself saying to people most often these days as advice to help them, take the first step in moving to shift well between the preparation and the performance mind?
Well, I heard 2 things in your question. The first part was, how do we develop resilience? And I have a simple formula for that, which is grit plus agility equals resilience. Like, we need to have both the grit, which is the passion and perseverance for long-term goals, the strength of character, the courage and resolve to keep going. And we have to have the agility, the ability to pivot, the ability to move in a different direction if we want to then have resilience. And so I think both of those are needed if we want to be resilient. And then as far as shift your mind goes and the ability to be in the preparation mind and performance mind, first it starts with awareness. What do you need? As you listen to these shifts, or perhaps you get my book, think about what is relevant to you and what is not. The book is not the 9 mental shifts to help you thrive in preparation and performance. It's 9. I have over 30 of these shifts, and some of them might not be necessary or might not be appropriate for you in your career and your business. And that's totally cool. It's not a panacea. It's not a one size fits all. And I loathe one size fits all approaches. So as you go through it, yeah, disagree with some. That's fine. It's all good. The big takeaway that I hope people get from this conversation and from the book is this idea of, hey, what do I need and when do I need it? And let's be more intentional about setting my mind for when I'm here, I need to be this way. And when I'm there, I need to be a different way, and to lean into it and give yourself permission to do both.
Excellent. Well, you've really helped us get on the right start in that direction today, Brian. I appreciate your book. I appreciate you being on the show. Where can people go to find more information about the book, get that, and stay in contact with you?
Sure. So our company website is called strongskills.co.co. It's strongskills.co. You can get all my information and our team's information there. And then the 2 places I like to play on social media are typically Twitter and LinkedIn. And I'm at Brian Levenson at both those places. Feel free to connect with me at either of those. And then the book, Shift Your Mind, you can get anywhere books are sold. Amazon. We also did an audio recording with Audible. So that's pretty cool. And then I have a podcast called Intentional Performers, where I interview all kinds of different people, military, business people, people in sports, authors. It's a smorgasbord of people, and I'm fortunate to get to spend time with them. And last thing is, I have a newsletter that's called Brian's Message of the Week. You can find that on our website as well. So Chris, really grateful for the time, excited to hopefully meet you in person one day over tea and coffee, wherever you choose for us to go if you're ever in the DC area, and just appreciate you. And I don't know if you still are a Syracuse fan, but we can say go Cuse at the end of this and sort of call it a day.
There you go. I would really look forward to that. And who knows, I might shift you from tea to coffee.
That good luck. It's been I'll tell you the story. I don't drink coffee, maybe in private one day, and we'll get into that.
Thanks, Brian, so much.
Thank you.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that episode today. A big thank you to Brian for joining us on the show to help us learn how to shift our mind. So much to think about here as we explore the polarities in our thinking, and really how some of these things that we didn't think were helpful turn out to actually be pretty critical if we want to perform well. in life, on the bar, or anything that we set our hands and minds to do in this world. So really great to have you, Brian. If you want more information about Brian and what he does, go to the website strongskills.com and be sure to subscribe to his podcast, Intentional Performers, and of course, buy this book, Shift Your Mind. It definitely will do what the title says, and I hope that this episode has done that for you today. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me about this show or any other episode of Keys to the Shop, just go ahead and email me, chris@keystotheshop.com, and you can also use that email for Keys to the Shop consulting. That's chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, as I'm recording this, there is an exciting thing happening in the next couple of days, and that is Coffee Fest. I'll be traveling to San Antonio for the first of 4 in-person shows this year with Coffee Fest, which for over 25 years has been offering, I think, the industry's most valuable and accessible resource for coffee retailers, bar none. I've been involved for a very long time, judging latte art, giving lectures. That's what I'll be doing this weekend. And I encourage you, if you want to grow and learn how to run a thriving retail business, then I would really try to get to Coffee Fest. It's happening in San Antonio this week. And then in July, we're going to Atlanta. August is Anaheim, California. And then in November, we're in Portland, Oregon. So go to coffeefest.com, see which show is right for you. Look at all of the really fantastic lectures and workshops that are available for you and your team. And I really hope to see you at one of these events. Again, you can find out all the information you need to know over at coffeefest.com. And with that, that is the end of our show today. Thanks everyone so much for taking the time to learn with me how to shift our minds. Have an amazing day. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.